Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up a stack of material centered around one of the 20th century's most fascinating, complex, and sometimes deliberately contradictory literary figures, Anaïs Nin.
That's right. And for those of you who know her primarily through her famous, and I mean groundbreaking, journals, this material offers a unique shortcut into a side of her life and work that remained, well, largely hidden during her lifetime.
We're talking about the intensely explicit erotica she wrote.
Exactly. On commission for an anonymous collector, these are the pieces that were posthumously collected in Delta of Venus and Little Birds.
So our mission today is to unpack the background and, frankly, the sheer philosophical audacity of this literary experiment. We are going to dive deep into the astonishing and, let's be honest, sometimes unsettling variety of characters and scenarios within her stories.
And these stories explore the furthest reaches of human desire, of fantasy, and obsession.
Yeah, this is not just a study of explicit writing. Prepare for a look at sexuality that is deeply analytical, philosophical, and, yes, extremely detailed.
What's so fascinating here is how Nin, writing under what is, the most vulgar constraint, a simple cash for content transaction, created this unique, almost ethnographic catalog of human behavior.
Ethnographic, that's a great word for it.
It is, because she forces us to move beyond the mere mechanical act and really consider the emotional, psychological, and even the historical context of desire.
So she's documenting the myriad ways people seek sensation.
Sensation, pleasure, and genuine connection. And she's demonstrating that the external framework is often the true aphrodisiac. It's not just about the act itself.
Okay, let's unpack the woman herself then, because her cosmopolitan background feels fundamental to her ability to observe the world without nationalistic boundaries.
It's completely fundamental. Nin was a genuine cultural hybrid, Spanish, Cuban, French, and Danish descent, born in Paris in 1903.
This international flavor, it just informs everything, doesn't it? The settings, the characters in her later work.
Absolutely. But her childhood was marked by a profound psychological shock. And the impact of this, I think, cannot be overstated.
You're talking about her father.
Her father, the composer Joaquin Nin, he abandoned the family when she was about 11 years old.
And that betrayal, that sense of abandonment, it led her mother to move the family Anaïs and her two brothers to the United States.
And that feeling of abandonment, the constant search for these powerful, transformative male figures, it just echoes throughout her entire body of work, not least her erotica.
She eventually returned to France, though. She settled in Paris with her husband, Hugh Gaylor, and lived there from 1924 to 1939.
And this pre-war period was absolutely crucial for her intellectual and psychological development. She didn't just move to Paris. She plunged herself into the heart of the European avant-garde.
Looking for answers, I imagine.
Looking for answers to the self-doubt that this familial trauma had instilled in her.
And that search for answers, it led her directly to psychoanalysis, which became one of the central themes and even methods of her writing.
It did. She underwent analysis in the 1930s, initially with one reality. But the major pivot point, the real change, came with her subsequent work with the world-renowned Otto Rank.
The Austrian psychoanalyst, right. He was a close associate of Freud before they had their famous break.
That's the one. And let's pause on Rank for just a moment, because this is where so much of the material really comes into focus. Rank's theories were transformative for Nin.
How so? What was it about his work?
Well, he focused heavily on the individual's will and the importance of relationship over the purely biological drive that Freud emphasized.
And why is that so key to her erotica?
Because Rank essentially gave her the framework to view herself, and by extension her characters, as psychological pioneers. They weren't just victims of, biological determinism.
So they had agency.
They had agency. Rank argued that neurosis comes from a failure to express one's creative will. For Nin, writing became the expression of that will, and sexual exploration became a means to self-discovery.
So her later erotica, which is filled with people acting out these very specific, complex fantasies.
It's a direct application of Rankian psychology. For her, fantasy isn't just a byproduct, it's the core engine of identity and action.
That makes perfect sense. And she was already immersed in that literary scene, which we know is famously chronicled in volumes like Henry and June.
Detailing her passionate and, let's say, emotionally exhaustive relationships with Henry Miller and his wife, June Mansfield.
She was living the material she was writing.
Precisely. And her early published works really reflect this intellectual striving. She published a defense of D.H. Lawrence's work, another writer obsessed with the complexity of male-female relationships back in the 1930s.
Then came her highly experimental prose poem, House of Incest, in 1936.
And House of Incest is so relevant here because it immediately establishes that Nin is interested in profound, psychologically charged transgression long before she was being paid to be explicit.
Following that, she published Winter of Artifice in 1939, and later her series of experimental novels like Ladders to Fire and The Spy and The House of Love, they were eventually gathered in cities of the interior.
It was her journals, however, that eventually won her this wide recognition, particularly among young people and students in the 60s and 70s.
But it was the release of the later unexpurgated diary volumes, things like Henry and June and Incest, that really shocked and captivated the literary world.
And that shock was intentional, I think.
Oh, absolutely. The material in those unexpurgated volumes was distinguishable because it finally included references to her husband, Hugh Geiler, and the complex, simultaneous relationships in her love life.
Things that were previously excluded to protect those involved.
Exactly. This willingness to expose her own complex emotional reality, her own contradictions, that's the final key to understanding why she was perhaps the only writer who could successfully execute the strange commission that came next.
And she certainly achieved wide recognition later in life. She was lecturing frequently at U.S. universities. She received an honorary doctorate from the Philadelphia College of Art in 1973.
And was elected to the prestigious National Institute of Arts and Letters in 1974 before her death in Los Angeles in 1977.
Her legacy, which is now translated into 26 languages, it really rests on this fierce commitment to honesty and to psychological depth.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. The genesis of Delta of Venus.
Right. The setting is Paris in the 1940s.
Yeah.
The world is literally falling apart.
And yet a mysterious, anonymous, wealthy client decides he wants to pay for high-quality erotica.
The commission was offered first, not to Nez, but to her friend, Henry Miller.
And the arrangement was so transactional, so clinical and precise. $100 a month to write erotic stories at $1 a page.
Which sounds like pretty good money for a writer in the 1940s. But Miller immediately rebelled.
So why did Miller, a man known for his frank sexuality in works like Tropic of Cancer, why did he refuse?
He found writing erotica to order to be a castrating occupation. That's his phrase.
The castrating occupation, wow.
He hated the idea of forcing his inventions for a purely commercial, anonymous purpose. He felt condemned to just churn out material, and critically, he didn't want to waste what he considered material for his real work.
So for Miller, this was beneath him. It was just manual labor that stripped the act of its spontaneity and its genuine desire.
Exactly. So Nin stepped in. And she saw the assignment not just as, a financial necessity, but as a literary challenge.
She described the venture jokingly, I love this, calling herself the madam of the snobbish literary house of prostitution.
And in doing so, she was protecting everyone's anonymity. But her writing, it started with an explicit philosophical position.
She began writing tongue-in-cheek, right? Intending to be outlandish, inventive, and so wildly exaggerated
That she thought the collector would quickly realize she was caricaturing sexuality. Her initial strategy was to lampoon the entire genre by taking its demands to a ridiculous extreme.
Maybe hoping to get fired or at least change the terms.
I think so. And how did the collector respond to this little literary rebellion?
He gave her strict editorial notes, delivered impersonally, probably over the telephone. Less poetry, be specific.
Less poetry. Be specific. He didn't want the texture, the atmosphere, or the psychology. He wanted clinical description of the physical acts.
And this tension, the collector demanding mechanism, Nin demanding context, this became the philosophical core of her entire project.
She found his demands profoundly frustrating. She noted that the requirement for graphic detail stripped the experience of all its nuance and ultimately its pleasure.
She literally had to force her inventions. She spent days studying sources like the Kama Sutra and listening to friends' most extreme adventures just to meet that $1 a page quota.
It turned a creative act into an industrial one.
It did. And this led to her brilliant, career-defining critique, which she eventually included in the preface of the published work.
And she argued that the collector's demand for explicitness was completely counterproductive to true eroticism. She stated it so clearly that sex loses all its power and magic when it becomes explicit, mechanical, overdone, when it becomes a mechanistic obsession, it becomes a bore.
That statement is just so powerful because it establishes her as an anti-pornographer, even while she's fulfilling the requirements of pornography.
Yes. This is the philosophical core of her counter-argument against the entire masculine tradition of explicit erotica.
And she tells the collector this directly, doesn't she? Arguing that by focusing solely on the physical, he was starving his own experience.
She writes, and this is a direct quote, "You are shrinking your world of sensations. You are withering it, starving it, draining its blood." The collector was demanding the skeleton, but Nin insisted that the life was in the surrounding flesh.
She advocates for mixing sex with everything, the messy emotional reality of human connection.
Emotion, hunger, desire, lust, whims, caprices, personal ties, deeper relationships that change its color, flavor, rhythms, intensities.
She says those external elements, the intellectual, the imaginative, the romantic, the emotional aspects, that's the fuel that ignites it.
And she provides this riotous list of what she calls spices, the things that transform the physical act from mere mechanics into ecstasy.
Tears, laughter, words, promises, scenes, jealousy, envy, all the spices of fear, foreign travel, new faces, novels, stories, dreams, fantasies, music, dancing, opium wine.
This list, it just reveals her Rankian influence so clearly. It shows that the will, the imagination, and the conscious pursuit of novelty are what makes sex erotic.
She emphasized that the source of sexual power is curiosity and passion. And the collector was missing the fact that descriptions of silk, light, color, odor, character, temperament aren't a waste of words.
But they are tributaries running into the mainstream of sex, nourishing it. She argues that no two hairs, no two odors, skins, or gestures are alike, and that context matters above all else.
And she culminates her thesis with this beautiful, concise condemnation of the collector's narrow focus.
Only the united beat of sex and heart together can create ecstasy. She fulfilled the constraint of the commission, she provided the explicitness, but she used every single story to prove that the explicit act standing alone is boring and ultimately destructive.
This is her mission, to explore the mysteries of woman's sensuality, which she believed the language of conventional male erotica was completely inadequate for.
That sets the stage perfectly. She was forced to write pornography, but used it as a vehicle for profound psychological exploration.
So, if the Baron represents the ultimate failure of sensation divorced from heart, let's start with him. He perfectly illustrates the path to mechanistic obsession.
Right. The first character she introduced to meet her allotted $1 a page quota was the Hungarian adventurer.
And Nin didn't skimp on his advantages, did she? Beauty, elegance, charm, the talents of an actor, knowledge of many tongues, and a genius for intrigue.
But his ultimate defining characteristic was his genius for avoiding permanence and responsibility. He was nicknamed the Baron.
The Baron's life was built on high-level manipulation, specifically serial marriage for money. He wasn't working. He was traveling in grandiose style, seen in the most luxurious hotels and on world tours.
Using his charisma to become the gravitational center of attention. When he needed capital, he would marry a rich woman, plunder her, and leave for another country, just seamlessly transitioning from one role to the next.
And the incredible psychological detail here is that the women often didn't rebel. They didn't complain to the police.
The source material suggests they felt the temporary experience of living with strong wings to fly above the heads of mediocrity was worth the financial loss.
His departure felt like a noble, almost natural flight, because no partner could follow his great eagle sweeps.
This framing is just brilliant. It establishes that the Baron is not just a sexual predator, but a master manipulator of fantasy. He sells a life of freedom and exceptionalism.
Fulfilling a romantic ideal for these women, which, for Nin, is a key spice in the erotic cocktail.
Exactly. But this free spirit almost faltered when he met Anita, a Brazilian dancer.
And she was described with these elongated, tiger-like eyes with lids that closed lazily like a leopard's. This description immediately establishes an aura of being perpetually aroused, which powerfully captivated the Baron.
And the scene describing his first encounter with Anita backstage is, well, it's shocking in its specificity. It fulfills the collector's demand for explicitness, yet twists it with this theatricality.
She was dressing among flowers, and for the delight of her admirers, she was rouging her sex with bright lipstick.
Treating it literally like a mouth opened by force.
The description of her vulva like a giant hothouse flower, abundant and glossy black, and the application of the lipstick making the lips blood-red camellias, it forces you, the reader, to acknowledge the constructed, theatrical nature of this sexuality.
It's a performance. It's staged for male voyeurism.
And the performance continued on stage wearing a tight, strapless costume emphasizing her breasts. In the theater's deep, dark, half-curtained boxes, she would kneel on request and perform oral sex on society men.
And Nin details the expert subtlety and rhythm of it, the shift from a firm hand grip of the entire penis to the lightest touch of the tip. This is technical writing, but it's framed by the artifice of the stage.
Despite his habit of freedom, the Baron was temporarily trapped by Anita's magnetic power. He stayed with her long enough to father 2 children.
But after a few years, his habit of freedom and change was too strong, and he was off again, traveling to Rome. And the pathology, it only deepens from here.
This is where the narrative shifts from the sophisticated sexual manipulation of Anita to something truly disturbing, this mechanistic compulsion.
The Baron's pursuit of money starts to deteriorate into a pure, risk-driven sexual quest. In Rome, he charmed the Spanish ambassador's family, who lived next door.
Which led to the ambassador's 2 young daughters, aged about 10 and 12, making it a habit to visit the Baron.
And this is a classic case study in psychological manipulation enabled by the girl's innocent trust. The Baron, maintaining this polite, fatherly demeanor while lying in bed with an erect penis under his big pale blue quilt, allowed the girls to playfully throw themselves over his bed.
They were starved of this laughter, apparently, by their more solemn father and mother.
The narrative carefully details how he used the playful nature of the game. The girls sitting astride him, wrestling to stay on the bed, pushing down on him, to achieve orgasm multiple times, completely unnoticed by the children.
His delight grew into excruciating suspense. He achieved a climax with a strength he had rarely known, surrendering the battle in a manner the girls never suspected.
And the games quickly progressed as his obsession grew. He would actively manipulate the situation, hiding under the covers and then suddenly thrusting his concealed penis upward for them to catch.
He even pretended to be an animal, hiding in the closet, covering himself with clothes, only to spring out and playfully bite her on the thighs, allowing his hand to go everywhere he wanted it to go in the confusion.
This is Nin showing us the dark side of mechanism. The Baron sought control and risk above pleasure itself. His sexual fury became an obsession.
So being satisfied did not calm him.
It did the opposite. It acted like an irritant. This is the very definition of the mechanistic obsession Nin warned the collector about.
And the final horrifying act confirms the complete breakdown of his moral and psychological control. Upon hearing Anita had died, he sent for their 2 teenage daughters, 15 and 16.
His obsession immediately turned incestuous.
He received them with affection, letting them fall asleep, one on each side of him. But he quickly moved from gentle fondling to outright coercion, awakening and forcing himself on them in the night.
Fearing they would leave, he became manic, practically imprisoning them. He went so far as teaching them to kiss each other in his presence just to excite him.
This abuse was so profound that when his wife, by whom he had a 14-year-old son, discovered it, she deserted him immediately.
But the Baron was too far gone. One night, wandering through the apartment, still a prey to this tormenting desire, he opened the door to his son's room.
And in the final act of self-destruction, he kneeled on a stool and forced his hard penis onto the boy's mouth.
The boy awakened choking and struck him, which triggered the daughter's final rebellion and departure. The Baron ends the story defeated, frenzied, and aging. The absolute proof that desire separated from the heart and driven purely by mechanism and control leads only to destruction.
It's a brutal illustration, and the story's position right at the beginning of the collection, it seems to function as Nin's warning sign to the collector. This is where your demands lead if you follow them without poetry.
A perfect transition, because if the Baron represents the ultimate failure of sensation divorced from heart, Mathilde offers a different starting point. The search for poetry in opposition to crude desire.
Right. She's a Parisian hat maker who inherited the Baron's concept of playing life as a series of roles.
Yes, she consciously manufactured her identity, which ultimately role-played her way to Lima, Peru, as an elegant representative of a Parisian modiste.
And Mathilde's initial quest was explicitly against the crude directness she experienced in Paris.
She resented men whose desire was so crude and direct that they could only blurt out their physical state like, "As soon as I saw you, I was stiff in my pants."
She wanted a poetic prelude. This pursuit of romantic, mysterious language courtship was finally satisfied in Lima, where incense, ritual, and elaborate flowery words disguised the men's intent.
But this need for context and concealment quickly led Mathilde into the exotic underworld of Lima. Peru, with its large Chinese population, was a hub for opium use.
And Mathilde's hat shop quickly morphed into a lavish boudoir full of chaiselongs, lace, satin, and heavy curtains, where she was initiated to opium by a Peruvian aristocrat named Martinez.
The opium effect is central to understanding her experience. The drug made the men more voluptuous than sensual.
And that's a crucial distinction. What exactly does that mean in the context of Nin's thesis?
It means the drug slowed time down. It magnified small sensations to an extreme degree, making the act of penetration less important than prolonged, delicate touch. They spent hours in slow, magnified caresses.
So she would lie naked on the floor, and a man might use just a single finger, seeking her sex, entering it and lying there, while another hand would be content just circling the vulva.
Every minor sensation, even a kiss, could throw shivers throughout her body. Opium provided the spice that transformed mechanism into this ritualistic sensation.
And Mathilde's self-perception changed dramatically. She felt like the rubber woman from a sailor's story, untiring, yielding, capable of utter abandon, finding pleasure in the stillness.
When alone, she discovered self-pleasure, using her fingers to open her vulva and find the odorous moisture within, likening the salty liquid to the secret milk of the gum plant leaf or the moisture of seashells. She was intent on finding this mysterious core of her own body.
Through Mathilde's connections, we then see these extreme fetish dynamics. She encounters Antonio, the prizefighter.
And Antonio had an African mistress whose impossibly high, round breasts were located almost parallel with the shoulder line. This physical detail is meant to emphasize the abnormality, the singularity of the fixation.
His obsession was absolute. He would only make love to her breasts, often resting his penis between them and spraying sperm on them, leaving the rest of her body, her actual sex, completely disregarded.
And she was left to masturbate herself, her lower half completely abandoned by him. It's a perfect illustration of how disassociation can create intense but ultimately unsatisfying focus.
Antonio soon insisted Mathilde visit his special den, which leads to the horrifying penknife nightmare.
He took her to a dirty, unfurnished room in the prostitute quarter, shared with a gaunt, diseased man. Under this overwhelming numbness, likely due to drugs, Antonio held a penknife open, touched the entrance of her sex with a tip, and pushed it slightly in.
She felt no pain initially, hypnotized by the open knife. But then she became wildly conscious of what was happening, the danger, the violence, the violation. Her scream broke the spell.
And the police arrived looking for a cocaine thief. This scene is Nin's stark portrayal of the violence and degradation you encounter when intellectual role-playing collides with the criminal reality of pure, desperate vice. Mathilde's poetic prelude led her to a knife edge.
Moving from the psychological perils of Mathilde, we shift to Peru's unique customs and geography to see how culture and devotion intersect with desire. We encounter the ring, a story built around a betrothal custom involving chain rings.
This is a complex story because it's layered with racial and political tension. An Indian man was in love with a Peruvian woman of Spanish descent, but he faced violent opposition from her family.
They held racist beliefs, claiming Indians were lazy and degenerate, incapable of producing strong children with Spanish blood. The father even threatened violence against the man.
So in a powerful gesture of commitment and defiance against this cultural racism, the Indian decided not to possess his betrothed secretly, as custom might have allowed. Instead, he made a profound physical sacrifice.
He placed her chain ring, not on his finger,
but around his erect penis, binding and encircling it so it would literally prevent him from taking her or any other woman until they were married. This act transforms the ring from a mere symbol into a physical lock.
And this act, intended as a symbol of devotion and purity, was intensely erotic for the woman. She was roused by the sight of his penis bound and encircled by her ring, viewing it as a physical manifestation of his exclusive devotion.
But the sacrifice was painful. It caused him such swelling that the ring had to be filed away by a doctor a few days later. They eventually ran away together to an isolated town to escape the persecution.
And Nin juxtaposes this act of extreme romantic devotion and physical sacrifice with the violent side of the region.
Right. She emphasizes the brutal, untamed nature of life there, reminding us of the danger that frames all these emotional narratives.
Yes, the town watchman immediately told the betrothed woman about a handsome Indian who went to the jungle, returned wild and poor, and committed a savage act, ripping a little girl's sexual parts with a long skinning knife.
And critically, the text emphasizes he had not violated her sexually, but used the knife purely as a weapon of raw violence.
And the planned punishment for this savage act was agonizing. flogging to death after inserting wax and a biting acid, a tribal punishment into his wounds so that the pain would be doubled.
These incredibly stark contrasts, extreme sexual devotion versus extreme raw violence, demonstrate Nin's determination to catalog the entire human spectrum, no matter how disturbing.
This theme of deception and transformation enabled by environment also appears in Majorca. Maria, a puritanical Majorcan fisherman's daughter conditioned to modesty, is tempted into a midnight swim.
And the temptation comes from a voice she assumes belongs to Evelyn, an American girl. The deception is brilliantly set up. Maria, tempted by the moonlight, sheds her dress and wears only her chemise.
The swimmer who begins wrestling and caressing her in the water is actually Evelyn's younger brother.
The dark, the bathing cap, and the specific observation that American women had voices like boys all helped maintain the illusion. They swam until Marie's chemise came off entirely, leaving her naked, setting the scene for transgression.
Maria realized the deception only when she felt something so unexpected, so disturbing between her legs. The boy had slipped his erect penis between her legs.
Though she screamed, a learned, conditioned reaction against violation, the embrace was immediately lulling and warming. The water, the physical contact, the hands all conspired to arouse her body past her conditioning.
And the transgression led to fulfillment. They collapsed on the sand, the boy took her, and the sea literally washed away the virgin blood. She found liberation in the act, facilitated by the illusion and the environment.
They continued to meet only in that hour, finding a foothold on a rock where they stood together, caressed by the waves, shaking from the shared orgasm. The sea itself is personified as an accomplice to the ecstasy.
We shift now from exotic geography to the environment that nurtured modern fetishism, the artist studios and bohemian life in Greenwich Village and Montparnasse.
This was a cultural melting pot where traditional barriers dissolved and complex sexual tastes were not just tolerated but actively explored. This is where Nin can truly put her psychological framework to the test.
And we see a perfect case study in the underwear fetishist. This man hired a model to pose only in intricate satin and lace underwear, particularly slit panties.
The specificity here is key. The model reported that he didn't even like women and would become impotent if he touched them. His pleasure was derived purely from the sight of the clothes, especially the finest black lace panties that were slit back in front.
So he could masturbate after she left. The slit design is critical, isn't it? It implies accessibility, but prohibits the messiness of actual intimate contact. It's voyeurism perfected.
And Nin, through her characters, ensures that the discussion immediately connects these adult fetishes back to childhood experiences, proving her psychoanalytical foundation. An artist remembered hiding in his mother's closet and feeling ecstasy at smelling her clothes.
The objects, veils, tool, feathers are merely placeholders for earlier foundational experiences of sensation.
Our host narrator recalled a similar link to an oral fixation, sucking condensed milk with a voluptuous feeling as a young girl that felt intrinsically related to being in love, a memory later recalled upon tasting sperm for the first time.
The point being that the meaning of the fetish object is always rooted in a specific, often forgotten moment of intense sensory pleasure from childhood.
This exploration of identity complexity is taken even further with Mafuka, an artist in Montparnasse with an hermaphrodite's body. Mafuka carried a small, atrophied penis, like a child's, but behind it, a delicate vulva mouth, rosy and tender.
Mafuka represents this enormous tension of gender and sexual identity, a theme far ahead of its time.
Mafuka was a real hermaphrodite, desiring women but unable to satisfy them as a man could, and feeling dissatisfaction even when taken by lesbians, who often felt disappointed by the small, atrophied penis, viewing Mafuka as not a real lesbian they could satisfy.
Mafuka preferred the character of men, their courage, their way of dealing with the world, but only desired women, even though she found women petty and personal.
This is so profound. The external identity, the man's character, is what's desired, but the internal desire, the sexual object, is directed elsewhere. Mafuka felt like a monster, caught perpetually between definitions, unable to resolve the conflict between masculine identity and feminine desire.
The story of Manuel the astrologer is a study in pure exhibitionism and the power of the public gaze. When he wasn't obsessed with his erotic exigencies, he was a great conversationalist, highly refined.
But sooner or later, he had to open his pants to exhibit his formidable member. The more people, the better. The more refined the party, the better.
The exhibition was a quest for power and external validation. If people looked at him for any time at all, he would fall into a trance, achieving an ecstatic crisis of orgasm rolling on the floor, sometimes over his own face.
The incongruity between his austere religious face and body and his prominent penis gave the organ a greater prominence, as it were, an apartness, which made the act shocking and effective.
His passive addiction eventually found its match. Manuel married a mature prostitute he met on a train. They developed an identical passive addiction.
They would sit opposite each other in an empty train compartment, he with his penis protruding, and she naked under her skirt with her legs wide apart, exposing her sex.
They stared at each other's genitals until they both reached ecstasy through masturbation and mutual gazing. This is Nin showing us that passion can be achieved through total detachment and voyeuristic consent.
They needed an external witness, but in the absence of one, they served as mirrors for each other's passive addiction.
Many female characters in Nin's collection are on a journey toward authentic sexual awakening, often starting from a place of emotional coldness or prescribed roles imposed by society or their partners.
And their quest illustrate the failure of external, non-emotional solutions.
Lilith is a poignant representation of the failure of chemical inducement. Her husband, Andre, was an intense but detached lover who preferred making love in dark opera boxes or whorehouses detached settings rather than the intimacy of their marital bed.
When he gave her Spanish fly pills, she hoped this would induce a wild sexual mood, dreaming of a lover entering and praising her body piece by piece.
But the pills failed entirely. Lilith felt tight between her legs and immensely disappointed in herself, sitting in a darkened cinema.
She called herself a monster whom nothing could affect. This isn't just a failure of the drug. It's the shame of failing to meet a masculine standard of immediate animalistic arousal.
She increased the dose dramatically but remained cold, resorting to using saliva to wet her husband's penis when he came to her bed, fearing that he would find a more sensitive woman if he knew the truth.
Lilith's story is a profound commentary on the pressure women face to perform sexuality and the futility of chemical fixes when the emotional connection is missing.
Then there is Marianne, the artist. She felt that her past experiences were clinical, anatomical, utterly lacking sparks, wildness, sensation.
She wrote privately that she wanted desire so strong that the mere sight of a man, even a block away, would bring on an orgasm. She was still a virgin in terms of profound visceral feeling.
Her experience drawing a male model who was constantly erect demonstrates this perverse transaction. He stood completely naked and erect, seeming transfixed and contented.
But critically, he only wanted to be looked at, achieving excitement from her focused, hungry gaze.
Which meant that when Marianne finally succumbed, fell on her knees before his erect sex and murmured, "How beautiful it is," he was content with mere admiration, not possession.
She was left in a frenzy of desire for his perfect body, feeling betrayed as a woman because her desire did not matter to him. It's the ultimate intellectualization of the erotic act, leaving her visceral need unfulfilled.
Linda also struggled with dissatisfaction despite having been expertly trained by her husband, Andre, to be a sexually perfect instrument.
Andre was a devoted lover who worshipped her body and trained her to concentrate all her erotic feelings in her mouth, which was his particular fetish, believing a full, moist mouth augured an open, generous sex.
But her sensuality was so vigorous she feared he would no longer be sufficient.
Her search for savage strength and fervor after Andre left for a trip led her to these strange encounters. She joined a masked orgy in the Bois, where the masks allowed the refined participants to turn into hungry animals.
She was astonished by the bestiality of her aggressor, finding herself in the grip of a brutal desire she hadn't known with her husband.
Her subsequent search for this savage strength led her to try prostitution, resulting in bizarre non-encounters. She met a harmless creature who merely wanted to admire her elegance, asked to see her handkerchief, and eventually fondle her shoe.
A man who extracted pleasure without any physical contact, demonstrating that randomness does not equate to fulfillment.
But she finally found intense desire through a man who smelled like Fez precious wood, a specific scent that acted like a drug, making her legs unsteady and her head foggy.
This perfume connection transported her, combining her current lover with the memory of a tall Arab she had once loved in Fez.
And this is perhaps the most profound detail about Linda's path. Her passion wasn't physical, it was a memory drug, an externalized fantasy. When the perfume ran out, her desire vanished, proving that the man himself was simply a vessel for the scent-induced memory.
She achieves ecstasy, but it is ephemeral and based entirely on external fantasy, not the heart connection.
Moving to more complex emotional entanglements, Elena's journey is perhaps the most central to Nin's exploration of love, identity, and betrayal. She found her initial awakening with John, the powerful voice, and then later with Pierre, a man of profound contradictions.
Elena found her body opened by John's powerful voice, which rolled over her like a pipe organ, making her vibrate. But her relationship with Pierre was different. It was so fraught that Elena eventually decided to become a consummate actress, simulating orgasm.
She would show all the symptoms, quickening breath, sudden languor to protect Pierre.
But why the need to simulate? This is a profound statement about the gendered labor of emotional management and sex.
She felt his struggle to always obtain an orgasm from her was destructive to him, and she feigned ecstasy to prevent him from losing confidence in her love and ultimately leaving her.
She sacrifices her truth for the sake of the relationship's stability.
Pierre, for his part, confessed his past as a Don Juan, admitting that he never wanted to truly know a woman, viewing them as little bourgeois seeking security.
He only regretted this power to open women to life, to love, when he met Elena, who maintained the fervor and the intensity of a mistress.
He also shared fragmented, darker memories of his past, including seeking out monstrous women in poverty and dirt, driven by self-destruction and vice. The sheer instability of Pierre's character moving between refined Don Juan and slum visitor meant Elena never rang his bell without wondering if he might be gone.
Reflecting the constant emotional insecurity she managed.
The complexity deepened significantly with Miguel, the homosexual character in Elena's relationship, highlighting a different kind of love that transcends traditional pairings.
Miguel was not aroused by Elena's tiny breasts, which lacked the gluttonous openings of his mother's full figure, finding comfort only in boys, particularly Donald.
Elena, initially heartbroken by Miguel's remoteness, later became enchanted by the dynamics between the two men. She came to understand that Miguel was making love to Donald as Elena in a boy's body.
He was seeing Donald as a twin brother who used her words and coquetries. Miguel was projecting his heterosexual ideal onto a masculine, safe vessel.
This creates a fascinating triangle. Elena and Donald formed a bond of malicious feminine conspiracy against Miguel, who was caught between them.
Donald, in Elena's presence, felt his masculinity asserted, becoming the perfect hermaphrodite, firm and serious. But when Miguel was around, Donald softened, becoming a travesty of women.
This character demonstrates the fluidity of identity depending entirely on who is watching.
Elena then explores relationships with women, fulfilling another side of her desire. Layla, the magnetic, aristocratic, masculine nightclub singer, and Bijou, the dark-skinned, voluptuous, professional woman.
Layla had an extraordinary air, wearing men's clothes despite police regulations, and doing so with such grace that people unconsciously bowed to her. She ruled the Montparnasse nightclub and whipped other women into being proud of their deviations.
Serving as a powerful, masculine figure for them, a safe man who was still a woman.
The three women eventually engaged in an extended, sustained love-making session on a fur rug, becoming all mouths and fingers and tongues and senses.
The experience was sensory, prolonged, and non-linear, with Bijou serving as the sensual centerpiece, a bed of down, soft, firm flesh without bones.
And the theme details the contagious and shared nature of the pleasure in great detail, reinforcing Nin's argument for context and emotional exchange over mechanism. Specific caresses included Layla's tongue, which was as hard as a man's sex.
And the detail here is astonishing. When Layla was kissing Bijou between the legs, Bijou's buttocks were thrown fully against Elena's face, and Elena inserted her finger into Bijou's anus, where she could feel every contraction caused by Layla's oral sex.
This complex, collaborative entanglement demonstrates the intensely communal and shared nature of the pleasure, which Elena sought to prolong to the point of exquisite torment.
They lay entangled, ceasing to be three distinct bodies. Elena noted that instead of feeling contented, Pierre's love had made her more vulnerable, awakening an insatiable woman who craved the moment of passion from everyone, preferring that fire over fixity.
The triple encounter, fueled by curiosity and shared transgression, proves Nin's thesis that emotion and connection exponentially increase ecstasy.
Our final character study offers a perspective on sexual anxiety, fantasy fulfillment, and the role of cruelty in achieving release. Marcel was blocked and constrained, characterized by his fluid identity, changing disguises, daily monk, Apache, peasant, violinist, reflecting a deep sense of insecurity about his true self.
He suffered from deep-seated nervousness in sex, feeling constrained and paralyzed by his past, unable to let go and find his rhythm. The narrator realized that jealousy was the key to breaking his timidity, which grew when he saw the host narrator with other men, Hans and Gustavo. Once they were alone, He kissed her passionately and furiously.
Marcel's room itself was violently erotic, covered with red rugs and animal furs. Jealousy had indeed broken his paralysis, making him like an animal, hungry for every sensation.
He then confessed his fantasy of having a woman wear many petticoats so he could lie underneath and look a fantasy connected to his first nurse.
This is a passive, voyeuristic fantasy, a clear link to childhood safety and pleasure. The narrator indulged this, dancing over his face in skirts while he looked up and panted with pleasure, allowing him to achieve a release built on nostalgia and control.
This psychological release then led to Marcel desiring cruelty. He demanded the narrator order him to bring a handsome man to take her in front of him.
Marcel was pale when the narrator ordered him to do it, and he brought a handsome Russian neighbor. The narrator not only gave herself to the Russian, but whispered to him to make it last.
While Marcel found the act of watching the Russian possess her extremely painful, he admitted that it hurt him. The cruelty successfully broke his paralysis, making him passionately aroused afterward.
He told the narrator, "You have the right rhythm for me. I go crazy after they leave, thinking about their nakedness and how I have not had my pleasure. But you are slow. You are like me."
He needed the extreme emotional pain of betrayal and observation to achieve the necessary break from his internal constraint.
The section contrasts Marcel's anxiety-driven, hurried approach, driven by the fear that his strength will not last, with the confidence of Gustavo and Hans.
Noting how a person's character is reflected in the sexual act, Gustavo was relaxed, falling into a dream state, needing to believe himself in love to be potent, enjoying a protracted orgasm where the pleasure never ends.
And Hans was the picture of security, calmly, completely to the last drop, enjoying his pleasure, with a penis that never softens.
For Nin, the sexual style mirrors the psychological health and security of the individual.
We end in the atmosphere of wartime Paris during the blackout. The narrator notes that danger lowered all barriers, making people crave companionship and affection as everyone was in equal danger.
The seriousness of the external situation brought down the internal walls. The narrator finds herself in a dark cubbyhole among the coats with an Arab man during the curfew.
The Arab with a magnificent penis would not let her have it in her mouth but immediately placed it inside her sex. She was so excited that she came immediately, but he was untiring, moving with an even, obsessive rhythm.
The darkness and the fallen coats created a sense of protected security, making her feel as if she were in a womb, warm and soft and shutting me in from everything else, protecting me, hiding me.
The security of the isolated, dark, wartime environment made the sexual act deeply profound, illustrating Nin's core point that danger, emotional context, and concealment are the true aphrodisiacs.
What stands out here is just the sheer breadth of human experience. Nin cataloged from sophisticated fetishism, identity crises, and pathological sexual violence in the Baron's story to profound tenderness and vulnerability in Marcel's quest for release.
It's a constant, relentless search for a connection that transcends the merely explicit act.
Yes, the learner came to us wanting a shortcut to being well-informed, and this deep dive proves that in the world of Anaïs Nin, true knowledge of desire requires examining not just what people do, but the psychological, economic, and emotional reasons why they do it.
She took a vulgar commercial commission and, by adhering to the constraints, turned it into an unprecedented literary map of human psychology.
She dismantled the genre from the inside out.
She did. The characters show us that obsession, whether with power, freedom, identity, a specific shoe, or even a particular scent, often dictated the most extreme behaviors and created the deepest ecstasies and the most agonizing disappointments.
Nin's Rankian perspective shows us these aren't random acts, but determined expressions of the will.
The great irony, then, is that forced to be explicit for the collector, Nin ultimately proved her own point. The greatest eroticism lies not in clinical description, which she found boring, but in the psychological complexities and hidden, messy emotional desires that frame the act.
She fulfilled the constraints only to show their limitations. She was constantly demonstrating that the external context and the internal state, the terror, the fantasy, the betrayal, the memory, the shame, are what give the sexual act its texture and its lasting meaning.
So what does this all mean for you? Anaïs Nin's work compels us to look beyond surface actions and interrogate the internal motivation.
Which raises an important question for you to mull over. If Anaïs Nin's ultimate goal was to show that only the united beat of sex and heart together can create ecstasy, which of these characters, if any, do you believe truly achieved it?
Was it the deception-enabled ecstasy of Maria in the sea, or the shared collaborative torment of Elena, Layla, and Bijou?
The answer, as Nin showed us, is never simple.